What's this all about? Why are they doing that? What's going on here?
It's Curious John. What is he curious about today?
Taiwan is a land of many languages, but the government is intent on adding one more to the mix, English. It set a goal of turning Taiwan into a fully bilingual nation by 2030. There are plenty of arguments for and against the idea circulating online right now, but how realistic is the idea in the first place? To find out more, I found a real-life English teacher here, Daisy Fan, a 20-year veteran of Taiwan's public high school system. I want to understand how English is taught here, what level of English the government expects graduating students to have, what Taiwan does right and wrong when it comes to English education, and whether Taiwan is really prepared to make English its second language within the decade. So can you walk us through a typical day in a Taiwanese English class? How would you organize your time in a typical day?
During the semester, every 4 to 6 weeks, we have a monthly exam. The students have to take the monthly exam, meaning we teachers have to cover 3 units. So we have about 4 hours of classes every week, and so we need to have students cover those units, maybe spend about 4 classes for each, and then we have to cover the vocabulary and the article, and then maybe give them some quiz or test to make sure that they absorb everything. Yeah.
What do you spend the most time on in a typical class?
I would say that for my students, they're about medium level learners. We need to help them memorize those new words from every unit, and at the same time we need to make sure that they understand the article. So we have to probably highlight some of the patterns and phrases and some usages. But I would say that compared with students from previous years, we're spending less and less time focusing only on grammar.
So it sounds like that there's a written article. That's what the test is about?
The test would be based on the 3 articles that we would be covering for the test. And I would say that the articles are especially written for these students. So they might not be that, I would say, authentic. Some of those sentences might not seem that natural. Yeah.
Is it simplified or just because they're not written by native speakers?
I think they're written by native speakers. But since they have to put everything, every new word and, every new pattern and phrases into that article. So it seems, in a way, designed.
Right.
Well,
it
for the test.
It doesn't sound like you have much flexibility to bring in your own materials, or is it? So are these articles standard like across Taiwan?
We do have 2 major publishers for the English textbooks in high schools or junior highs across Taiwan. So we don't have that much of a choice. We simply have to pick one out of the 2. So not that much flexibility, I would say.
It doesn't sound that, from what I've heard so far, that there's much exposure to the spoken language. Is that an issue?
Which is true and unfortunate. I personally, an English teacher, I do hope that I can spend more time helping my students improve their listening and speaking. But unfortunately, with the current curriculum and this test-oriented teaching and learning, I don't get to do much of listening and speaking practices with my students.
So when I was learning Chinese, we had to spend a lot of time memorizing texts, like you said, articles. Is there a similar emphasis on rote learning in Taiwanese English classes?
I'm teaching in a public school, so we might not do that much rote learning. But I would say that for students in private schools, they definitely do a lot of rote learning, which is necessary if the students are building foundation for their English. But I don't think we're doing that much rote learning anymore now in high school.
And how much time do the students spend getting to actually speak or write in English? Is there a communication-oriented approach, or is it really just about passing exams?
I would say that unfortunately we definitely are a test-oriented teaching mode, that students don't really get to speak that much, meaning they might not be able to communicate with foreigners, when they actually get to meet one. Yeah.
So I guess one question I've long had actually, about what sort of, is there a checklist of tasks or things that the Taiwan government or education ministry expects students to be able to do by the time they've graduated high school? I mean, what sort of level is expected? Should they be able to understand a news broadcast, read a novel or a magazine, talk to a foreigner?
Ideally, these what you just mentioned, John, would be, I would say, criteria on how we should evaluate the students' learning of English. But unfortunately, since we're test-oriented, the students probably have like 5,000 to 6,000 words in their head, but they might not be able to use them when they actually need to. Yeah.
Do you find that the sorts of words they're expected to learn are practical?
Unfortunately, no. Even more unfortunately, I mean, when I was their age, when I was in junior high and senior high, I still remember vividly when I went to the States for the first time when I was 14. I was so hungry one night that I wanted my host family to provide me with some food, but I couldn't come up with the names for those items. And sadly, I would say that if my students get hungry when they're in another country and they want to, ask for those items, they might not be able to name them either, which is a pity.
Are you given any sort of checklist, though? Like, for instance, okay, today we need, with this month, they need to learn how to talk about their daily routine or their views on something or order food, like you said. Or is it really just whatever's on the test schedule?
Like, recently we had this really hot topic called Bilingual Taiwan by the year 2030. So in a way, the Ministry of Education, I mean, those officials or the principal or the deans of each school would encourage us English teachers to have students speak a little bit more in English, to try to practice speaking a little bit more often. But I have to say, like, I actually try to do so in my own class, but the students, especially the really hardworking ones, they would ask me to stop having them practice so much speaking, but to focus on the reading and writing, which matter more to them because those would help them score high on the test.
Right.
So this is some of the, not everyone, but some of the students actually asked me not to focus so much on speaking and listening.
So it doesn't sound like there's really a set of goals or stages. What are the tests about then, generally? What sorts of things do they cover? Like
for the monthly exams,
yeah,
they would be tested on vocabulary and translation and some grammatical questions, some reading comprehension, but definitely not that much focus on listening, and definitely 0 point for speaking.
Are the tests thematic? Do they have a theme, or do they build on each other gradually, or is it just random?
They're just random,
Really?
which is wrong, but I don't think anybody is doing anything about this.
So having said that, what are some of the other weak points of Taiwan's English curriculum that you can think of? What do you think should be improved?
There's so many weaknesses. I simply couldn't. Well, let me try. First, as I've always believed, we should try to focus a little bit more on speaking and listening, because those two aspects would definitely matter a lot if my students get to use English in their daily life. But since the college entrance exam, for that test, they only have to do reading and writing. So the only possibility would be for the college entrance exam to be reformed, to include more emphasis on speaking and listening. And only when speaking and listening are included in that test will the parents or the students take speaking and listening seriously.
Well, what are some good things that you have to report? What are the strong points of Taiwan's? What are we doing right, and what are things that have gotten better? You mentioned a reduced emphasis on grammar.
I think my students definitely could write pretty well and read pretty well, but they definitely need to speak a little bit more. And I would say that most of my students are actually weak when it comes to listening. I mean, if I play a segment of English news broadcast, then probably half of them would have no idea what the speaker is talking about.
Why do you think that things are the way that they are?
I think one major reason would be it's literally impossible to come up with a standardized test for speaking. We have no way to actually evaluate it with the standardized test, which is something that the parents in Taiwan care a lot about.
Well, that is a cultural thing, but I mean, there are some rubrics like for instance, in Europe, they have that sort of A1, A2 sort of system, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we can work on. I mean, right now it seems impossible, but I think it's definitely workable. We can definitely come up with a system to evaluate speaking.
But if Taiwan is to become fully bilingual, there are other big obstacles in the way too. Obstacles that include the disparity between urban and rural Taiwan, and between kids from wealthy households and underprivileged ones. Join us again next week when teacher Daisy Fan tries to unpick these issues. I'm Curious John, and I hope to see you then.